Hey, before we get going, I just wanted to say this was recorded before I was able to take the Z9 onto actual jobs. And since this video, I actually have done a few days in the real world, in the field, putting this camera through some paces. And I've had some more insight to things that I was looking for in this camera. So I will be chiming in with some tidbits, but for the most part, I do agree with what I was saying here with just casual use, so I didn't feel like I needed to burn a bunch of time to re-record this one. But I just want to let you guys know that what you're about to watch is before I started working with it, and I might pop in here and there to add in some stuff about what happened while I was working with it. That being said, hope you enjoy the video, and I'm looking forward to your comments. All right, let's talk about a few things I love and a few things I hate about the Nikon Z9. What's going on, everyone? Seth Miranda here, coming from my studio right here in Manhattan. If you don't know who I am, I'm a pro photographer right here in New York. You may have seen me on some other channels. This is my personal one, and I fairly recently got myself a Nikon Z9. So this is not sponsored by Nikon. There's no money exchanged hands at all. I bought this, and this is just my own thoughts on it. I have been using the Z system since day one. I was using a D850 prior to that, and I've had Nikons pretty much throughout my entire career, mixed in with other cameras that I've had out there. Right now I'm mixing in a bunch of Fuji cameras like the GFX 100S and the X100V that I absolutely love. But for the most part, I've been primarily a Nikon shooter as a professional here in New York. So I was super excited about the Z9, and I had to get it. I got the opportunity to do the pre-release video, so I got to mess with it all day on set. I got to play with it for a few days after the fact on that, and it just kept on clicking off boxes for me one after another that I was waiting to come to fruition in the Z system. And I'm not gonna bore you with the stuff that you've probably seen 1,000 times from every other person on YouTube that got a chance to mess with the Nikon Z9, but I am gonna give you a little bit of an insight on some weird quirks that I myself tend to like about it, and maybe some general things. I mean, ergonomics are awesome, the battery, awesome. But when I say things like that, this is coming from a place of I've shot everything. I have had videos out there forever of me shooting every brand and system. I think the only brand that doesn't have a video of me shooting something was Phase 1, and I shot that, but it wasn't for a video. But you can find examples of me shooting everything out there. I am extremely happy with the Z9. It does everything they said it was gonna do, and I am very excited about the low light autofocus, the autofocus in general, the speed of this thing, the build quality, the size of it, the weight of it. It feels great. The button layout is a little changed, but it doesn't feel unfamiliar. And the backlit buttons, mwah, had that on the D850, and it was one of the best things ever, especially if you're someone like me that works in dark studios often, where there's only light what you're shooting and everything else is dark, and you're taking your phone out all the time to check things. You don't have to worry about that, and that's really great. And I'm sure that ticks off a bunch of boxes for people that have reviewed this camera, as well as the full-size HDMI port. Great, right? Yeah, and that's all well and good. We all know this stuff. But the weird little things that I like are something like the speaker being right under the EVF for the silent shutter, or I should say electronic shutter, because when there's a speaker, it's not silent, right? But it kind of is, because when I put the volume all the way down, only I hear it. And every time I've been shooting with this thing, no one has ever said they could hear the shutter or even knew I was shooting unless flashes were going off. And the other thing is, if you wanted to, you could plug headphones into this and then really only keep the shutter sound for yourself. If you're somebody that needs an audible cue that you've, or a confirmation rather, that you've shot an image, because you're not seeing the visual like boxes around that flashes to let you know you took a shot. And if you're in a noisy environment, you can put on headphones that'll block it out and you can hear the shutter. Or if you're in a super quiet environment that no one can hear the shutter, but you need that audible confirmation, you have that ability as well. I thought that was a neat little touch. I don't know if it was on purpose. I did try to pump the audio out of the headphone into something to record it, and I couldn't get it to do it, which is kind of interesting, but maybe I'm not doing something right, but I wanted to share that with you. I will also say that at the time of getting the Z9, I suffered a back injury. If anybody out there who follows me on Twitter or Instagram knows, I broke a disc in my back and was unable to work for the last few months. But I have used the camera extensively in casual situations. Nothing pressure heavy, nothing really on the line. Obviously no jobs or anything like that, but I have been shooting with this camera, and I've been trying it with a few different lenses. So I hopefully can give you some insight. Maybe we'll do this when the firmware 2.0 comes out and overhauls this camera, I should say. Maybe that'll be an update video to this. So let me know down below if you would like that. I'm sure this video will be outdated pretty quick because I feel like that firmware update will not only be so significant, but will be sooner than we think. So if you do want an update video to the Z9 and my thoughts on it, let me know down below in the comments. The other thing I really like is the matching card slots. And I know a lot of people have already pointed that out, but having CF Express Type B twice over is awesome. That means you're not using an SD card that can bottleneck the camera, whether it be from the speed or some features in the camera or something like that, or capacity. And if you're someone like me that's kind of transitioning over to a format, it's nice to not have to split your resources up into 2 different medias. You can just keep on going the course with one, and it's really easy and convenient. And CF Express Type B is just becoming more and more of a standard out there. Lumix is using it, Canon is using it, Nikon, and some cinema cameras out there are using it. And it's only getting bigger, faster, and cheaper with more options out there. I personally like the AngelBird cards that I've been talking about. You can check out the link down below for Adorama Rewind, where I go into depth on those cards. But for the most part, it's just gonna get better and better as it gets more and more adopted and more brands keep putting it out there. It's really, really great. And the fact that it can go so far, I think we're up to 4 terabytes at the time we're recording this video, is kind of crazy. Yeah, they're super expensive, but it only gets cheaper from here. So I am all on board for that, and it's just awesome. Now, the one thing I'll say is I have run video on this pretty hard, and I've tried in multiple situations just to get it to overheat, and I didn't. However, I am not in the desert. It has not been summer. I'm not holding a hair dryer to it or anything like that, but it just gets a little warm after you trying to make it overheat. So that right there is a good peace of mind. And that's one thing you get out of flagships, is a peace of mind that's built well and it'll always be there and ready to work. It's a tool. All these people get romantic about, like, oh, it's my camera, my best friend. I'm not like that. It's a tool, and it's got to work when I need it to work and do the job I need it to do. This is really a workhorse camera, and I'm really psyched on it. The sensor shield is great and all that stuff, but having less moving parts, and also the fact that there's no shutter count anymore for mechanical, that something could actually give out physically, is very, very interesting. The one thing I'm wary about with used cameras is shutter count, and that kind of eliminates that here. But I also feel like, wait a second, I say this all the time when I'm live, but I guess I should say it here in case you guys don't watch my live streams. Mirrorless cameras don't really have an electronic shutter count, at least not all of them do. And it's not even about just the electronic shutter count. It doesn't matter if the pixels are going on and off. It matters how long they've been on, because after a while, electronics deteriorate and you could have dead pixels and all sorts of issues. So it's kind of crazy where we are in the used market, that there is no like timer that shows you how long a camera's been operating. Case in point, I have a Nikon Z9 that I use as a webcam for when I stream on Twitch, right? Well, that thing only has 3,000 shutter actuations on it, but it's been on for about 3 years. Looks brand new. I could sell it as almost as good as new, or whatever you call that, and no one would know. So I'm wondering if this camera is going to eventually have that put into it, maybe by a firmware or something like that, just to let you know how much runtime's been on it, how long the EVS been running, how long the LCD's been running, how long the sensor has been active pumping data into those feeds. And that's the other thing I'll talk about, is that I really find no lag on this thing. It's incredible. Even in video, which has been a problem with the Z system in the past, that there's been like a lag that when you wave, you see it like a second later on like an Adamus when you're recording yourself. I'm not seeing that here. It's incredible. So very, very impressive always around. And of course, the price was just great. I can't say that I would have jumped on this so quickly had this been the $6,500 that we thought it was going to be. It came out at $5,000, and that is launch price. So it can only get easier and easier from here, whether it be from rebates, used, refurbished if you go that route. It can only get better from here. I'm not going to mention things that are consistent across the entire Z system. Like, I know some other channels like, it's got a top screen and that's great. They all have top screens, and I'm just going to write a quick love letter to top screens though. If you've ever seen me shoot live, you always see me, the first thing I do, like a snap reflex, is to check that top LCD. And in my head, I guess after all these years of shooting it automatically puts my head in the space of what's going on inside this camera, and I'm good to go. I don't have to look around the edge of a frame and, you know, put together puzzle pieces of what's going on. It's just like right there on a top screen, and I absolutely love that. What's cool about this top screen is that while it's off, it still tells you how many images you have left on the memory card. So you're right out of the box. You don't have to even turn it on. You just know where you're at if you have to take extra cards or whatever. Something stupid, but it's kind of nice. Just little touches here and there go a long way. I will say that the battery life is pretty impressive for a mirrorless camera. Now, if you're from a DSLR where they last like days on a flagship, it's not there. But it does give me a full day without me having to swap out a battery, which is awesome. And because it's USB-C power delivery with the new battery, when I'm tethering in a studio, it's always got power. I never have to think about swapping a battery out. I just always know I have power. However, if you're running from a laptop, keep in mind it's drawing from the laptop, but if the laptop's plugged in, you're kind of good. It does put wear and tear on the laptop, but just so you know, that's an option, right? You have to ever worry about it not being there for you. It'll always have power, and that's awesome. And the other thing that's great about it is you can use the older batteries. If you're having trouble finding the battery for the ENEL18D for the Z9, which is the newest battery, which is got a longer capacity or bigger capacity or other, and power delivery, you can use the older ones. I wouldn't go all the way back, maybe use a C or a B variant, and you can find them, you know, probably used, which not really the greatest thing, but you can find them. That's what's great about this. So if you're ever in a bind and you just want to have more batteries, or you're in a rush to go on a trip or something like that, and you just know you're going to need them, you can find a lot of options out there for this, which is awesome. Okay, what else? Well, what I really like is that 3D tracking autofocus. I'm sorry, but I do like it. However, I don't use it the way a lot of other people do. And this is how I'm gonna bridge what I love about this camera into what I don't like about this camera, which is probably more interesting to you guys, right? Look, you've heard about all the good stuff, right? So and everybody has been telling you all the positives about this camera, and it's definitely a worthwhile camera, especially if you're a Nikon shooter already, I'll give you that. Now, the 3D tracking autofocus. Here's the thing. When you use the 3D tracking autofocus, you're basically having a point, you get onto something, you lock it, and then you can compose however you want. It's just gonna track whatever you're looking for. And that's great. It works awesome. I'm pretty happy with it. And it's only going to get better as the firmware gets updated, because the processor is just bananas in this thing. Cool, got it, right. Now, the thing about it is, with things I shoot, if I want to turn off the tracking, because if you put on people autofocus or face detection rather, and you're in 3D tracking, it won't work on just anything you want to track. You can track whatever you put it on, but as soon as it gets close enough to a face, it's going to go right for that face and grab an eyeball. And maybe you didn't want that. And a lot of times when I'm shooting, I don't want that. I don't like the camera making a lot of decisions for me, but keep in mind, I'm doing things like shooting makeup and jewelry and things like that. And sometimes I want to do something where the face is out of focus and the watch is sharp or something like that. So my first complaint about this thing is there's no way to map a button to toggle on and off whether you want subject tracking. You can change manual focus, auto, AFS, AFC, you can change your focal point, you can do all these things, but you can't toggle on and off the tracking. If I could do that, it would be lightning fast for me, because the way I really use the 3D tracking is pretty much like old school focus recompose, except it's super, super accurate, because it's still focusing while I recompose. So if I'm off axis a little bit, it'll just correct for me, which is awesome. So if you're someone like me that does like focus, recompose, and sometimes it gets a little soft because you were at a shallow aperture or something, or whatever happened, or because you changed your pitch or yaw, whatever you want to call it, it'll compensate for you, which is great. But I would really love a way to turn off the subject tracking so I can make a decision on what I really want to focus on rather than the camera trying to focus for me. You know, maybe we'll see that firmware update, I don't know. Okay, yeah, so while I was working with this camera, I did find myself in a few situations where I wish I had the ability to customize the size of the 3D tracking autofocus point. So it seems like it's close to being a single point autofocus point, but I think for me, maybe it's a little bit bigger. I don't know, maybe I'm just crazy, but I do wish I could scale it down to maybe pinpoint or smaller than single point maybe, or even making it larger to give me a larger field of grabbability for the 3D tracking tracking in certain situations. That's just something I came across while I was working with it. Maybe we'll see that as an addition to the new firmware coming out. It's supposed to be so massive. There's a huge amount of changes. I'm even hearing rumblings and rumors of it acting as if it was like a Z9 2, like it's that much of a change. So maybe I'll do an update to this video, but that was definitely something I wish I could change about the Z9, is the size of the 3D tracking autofocus point. Back to you, Seth. The other thing about the autofocus that bothers me is, one, there's no pre-AF, which is something you see in other cameras where it's actually autofocusing for like a few seconds before you start using it. And that really does get the camera more into a frame of mind of where you are. So if you're someone that's working really fast and your focus is all the way over, it's already closer than farther away when you go to grab the camera. I would love to see Nikon implement that. And then the other thing I have a problem with the autofocus is you have AFF in video, which is autofocus full time. Awesome. I'm using it right now. I mean, it's focusing on my hand and then it'll focus on my face, and that's great. You don't ever have it in stills mode on any Z camera, and it drives me crazy. The fact that Nikon has not thought about putting this in the stills end of the camera is crazy. Let's say you're someone that just wants to shoot self-portraits. You're someone that's, you know, a fitness guru and you need shots for yourself and you're taking photos of yourself, whatever. You don't have AFF. If you did, you could have set a timer and it's constantly focusing for you till it takes the shot, or actually it'll probably keep focusing after it takes the shot. This would be huge and great for content creators like me. Not that I shoot myself a lot, but I mean, I'm shooting myself right now, but I mean stills wise, but I could see it being crazy useful, and I can't believe we don't have it. Nikon, what the? The other thing that really bothers me about the Nikon Z system and even the Canon system as well is when you put a flash on this thing, it kills your ambient exposure simulation in the camera. So you know when you are able to change your exposure and there's no flash attached and you can actually see what's happening in real time with the ambient light? Well, if you're mixing flash in there, as soon as you put a strobe on, the camera thinks you just want to have an EVF or LCD that's completely illuminated so you can just see what you're doing. And yeah, you do. But what if I want to mix in that ambient light? What if I want to underexpose the background or overexpose it in some cases and just keep tabs on where I'm at in the ambient light, and then I'm just mixing in my strobe? Well, Nikon and Canon, or at least right now, don't let you do that, and they haven't let you do that. But there is a workaround that I found that I actually am kind of liking more than when I shoot with other brands like Fuji and Sony actually let you still see the ambient exposure while you have a flash attached. This is a cool workaround. Check this out. So this is the ambient light, right? This is my ambient exposure. If I crank it, it goes all the way dark. If I slow it down or if I change my aperture or any type of exposure, it'll change, right? So you're seeing the ambient exposure, right? So this is what the space looks like. But let's say I want to underexpose it by quite a bit, just so I see a little bit of detail in those shears. I get my subject in there and I focus and I'm good. And then I want to introduce a strobe and I want to just know what my ambient light is doing, because that's basically sunlight out there and it could change as I'm shooting. And I just want to keep tabs on it. Well, in real time, you're not able to do this, because as soon as I put on a strobe of any kind, whether it be a speed light, whether it be a trigger or whatever, and then I actually turn it on, it'll change everything. So here the speed light is on the shoe, I turn it on, and all of a sudden, boom, I have this illuminated workspace, right? So you're actually seeing everything, but this is not the exposure. This exposure was underexposed when we set it, right? So the camera thinks you want a space to work in inside the EVF, like, so you're not working in the dark, so to speak, which is great. What I found as a workaround is I mapped function 1 to turning my flash off. So if I press that, boom, I'm able to see what the ambient exposure looks like, right? And I can take all the frames I want. Then as soon as I take my finger off of it, I'm back to this workspace, and then I just have to kind of think about, well, it looked underexposed, and I have to keep that in my head, and then when I want to take the shot with the strobe, I can do that. So it is kind of cool that you can have a workspace that's illuminated so you're not working in the dark, and then just touch a button to keep tabs on the ambient light, as opposed to in other systems where I am stuck at being in a really dark EVF if that's the exposure I want for the ambient. See, with optical DSLR, you're looking through glass. You're not looking through an EVF that's showing you exposure simulation. So it's trying to kind of simulate that while you're using a strobe. And I get that, and it's cool in some cases, but I'd love to have the option of just being able to override it overly illuminating the EVF or LCD when I want to see what the actual exposure is and work in that environment. Sometimes you just want it a little bit underexposed, and it's totally workable, or some other things. So I would just really like to have that ability. I have told Nikon this up and down, left and right. I've said it straight to their engineers, and it's like, no one's listening. But Canon seems to have the same issue as well. I don't know if that's changed, but I know Fuji and Sony, they totally let you work in the ambient light exposure. So it is possible, and I would like to have that as an option on here. Just give me all the options. Give me all the options. Another thing that I thought I was going to hate was the EVF being the same resolution it's been at. Now, having used all the other systems that have higher res EVFs, I think Canon has one of the best EVFs in my opinion. But I will say that the extra resolution isn't all it's cracked up to be, and it often doesn't stay at the resolution the cameras rate them for. It does drop in resolution while it's focusing in other situations. And then one of the big problems I found, I'm not going to compare this to other manufacturers or whatever, but one of the competitors to the Z9 has such a high-res EVF that it's just draining battery like crazy. And when I was using that camera, I went onto a bunch of forums and I was trying to figure out, was there any power saving that I'm not enabling in the menus that I'm missing? Is there something I just don't know about, a weird quirk? And then everybody was kind of coming with the same thing of, well, just dial down the EVF, just dumb it down and you'll be fine. I'm like, but wait a second, you're paying an extra grand for the camera, and you're getting the spec that's on paper that you're paying for and that you want, but if I want the camera to have reasonable battery life, I have to dial that down. So I was like, if I'm gonna do that anyway, might as well save the money on the camera and might as well save the battery life off the bat. And I thought I was gonna be like, oh man, I wish I had more res in the EVF. But as I use this camera, I don't think I've once gone, man, this EVF is trash. I've never said that. It's really great. I actually really enjoy it. The glass in front of the EVF, the screen in the EVF is really one of the biggest parts of it. And I think Nikon has clearly done a great job with that. I think everybody can agree that they have a great EVF overall, and you're not paying the price of battery power or something else processing power, right? All that extra resolution. Another thing I'm gonna gripe about, and just because I know it's possible, is the 30 frames per second. I wish it did 30 frames per second just because I want it. I mean, I'm just, I'm a jerk. I'm probably never gonna use it, but I will say 30 frames per second on other cameras come at a serious caveat. It really does. You have either half the resolution, which is cool. If you want that, no problem. But when you start giving me compressed and 12-bit-ish RAW files, that's when it's a big difference. That's when you're really changing image quality. And maybe that isn't a big deal to some people out there, but to me, it is. I'm just wondering if there was some way that they could still do 30 frames if they enabled 12-bit RAW. At this time, this camera won't even let you select 12-bit RAW files on this, but I'm wondering if further down the line, not gonna be like, all right, let's just give it to them. Because they already give us this 120 frames per second in 11 megapixel JPEGs, which I thought was dumb, and then I tried it, and then I was like, oh, I see the applications for this. I could see why I would need it, or not need it, or just it would be good to have for like reference points, or just shooting something to find that exact second, because it's actually better than shooting video and pulling a frame. And it's not just because you have all these frames, you gotta pull it out. It's because you're not at the mercy of the frame rate. When you shoot video at 120, you've got to be at 2/40th of a shutter speed. If you're trying to freeze action, it's not going to do it. You got somebody swinging a bat, they're not freezing that action at 240th of a second. What they will freeze it at is 1,000th, 2,000th. And when you can do 120 frames per second at 1,000th, 2,000th, 3,000th of a second, or faster probably, you're actually able to pinpoint things, and that is impressive. So yeah, a lot of other cameras can do different things. Nikon made a point of making it a feature in this, but what I'm wondering is, Nikon, why can't you give me 60 frames per second at 22 megapixels, or keep on changing it so that while the res goes down, my frames per second go up, even if it's JPEG? I'm so curious if that's even a possibility. This camera brings up so many questions sometimes that I'm like, why couldn't it do this? Why can't it do that? Why is there only a 2 hour and 5 minute limit video on this thing? Nobody knows, but it's still a great camera. The 30 frames per second, is it a deal breaker for me? Absolutely not. In fact, I have never been someone that sprays and prays. And I think fast frames per fast frames per second is like one of these things that everybody's like super psyched to get, and then when you get it, you're kind of like, yeah, I don't want to enable this all the time. And even if it's in like short bursts and you're just trying to get something, that perfect moment of when they're hitting the ball or whatever, you'd be surprised how much 30 frames per second still gives you a bunch of frames you just don't need. And it's still nice to have the 30 frames, but I also don't care. I don't know if that, so I'm going to chalk this up as a draw on the 30 frames per second. I really, having shot 30 frames on 2 other cameras and then going to 20 frames in this, I'm not going like, oh, no, I wish. I'm good. One thing I think is ridiculous that this camera doesn't have, and I mean, what are you doing? There's no tally light on it. There's a light right here. It flashes green when you're doing a self timer. In fact, if I did it right now and I set it up to take a shot, can you see it? Right there, boom. Why aren't you making this a tally light? Just let this glow as if it's on while someone's recording. Like, I had someone filming me with this camera and I was like, I had no clue they were filming me, and that I'm used to that with other cameras, but come on, you got the light right there. Come on, Nikon, give me the tally light. Stupid little things like this go a long way. If that comes in the new firmware, we're good. I got a feeling there's a lot of things that are going to come in that firmware, and maybe most of the stuff that I'm complaining about just goes away. Let's talk about this hot shoe, because I thought it was a negative that it didn't have the data shoe. And now that Canon has a multi-purpose shoe and Sony has their data shoe where you can just put in accessories that will get powered from that, or other things, like an XLR mic adapter or something like that, I was like, oh man, why'd they miss on that one? And then I dialed it back and I realized it's a complete physical fail point of the camera where something can short out, or it's literal data contacts and power contacts that are exposed to the world out there. And I know that a lot of Sony shooters are crazy about getting that plastic piece in there when they're not using it. And then I was talking to Matt Irwin, and he was actually like, you know what, if I'm going to be that crazy about audio, I'll record it separately or something like that. Or if I'm shooting into an Atomos, I record it into the Atomos anyway. And I'm like, yeah, I guess if you are going that far with XLR mics and stuff, you kind of are putting it into like a separate recorder. It is nice to have, but the other side of that is you can totally put an adapter in here, run it off of like the AA's or whatever kind of, or 9-volt or whatever battery that particular adapter takes, and then just connect it with a cable and you're fine. I mean, it's just kind of nuts that I off the bat, I was like, oh man, but it's funny how things gain perspective once they're finally in your hand. So you can watch all these reviews and you can, play with a camera for 5 seconds at a store, but until you are actually in a place where you're trying to apply it to situations, you kind of don't realize what you don't care about and what you do care about. And it's funny, the weird little things that you like, and then the things they put in this that are funny little quirks that you're like, oh, that was a tiny little detail. Good, great for thinking that. But there are tiny details that drive me kind of crazy as well. Let's talk about that. So the screen on this will actually change the information around the screen to vertical when you're shooting vertical. 20 plus years of shooting and having my eye drift to the right along the edge and reading things sideways has got me so conditioned to that when this thing does that, it freaks me out and I'm lost for a second, and I am still not used to it. And I'm debating every time I pick this camera up to lock the information in place like I know it tried and true, or to condition myself to get used to the display shifting like that. And what I came to the conclusion is because I'm not only shooting this camera, I keep it locked in place anyway. Because if I pick up another camera and I get used to looking at my information on a vertical format, I've got to, adjust to that anyway. So I just stick my information to stuck around and around the edge, and I leave it that way. So I'm like not even using the feature. I don't know, let me know down below if that's something you guys are excited about, that the data shifts to vertical format when you're shooting. People seem excited about it. Maybe I'm just missing something, I don't know. Look, as many shortcomings as this camera might have, which is not many, if any, it's still incredible. I mean, it does everything I want it to do, and it gives me that Nikon image quality I'm psyched on. And then you see these reports about, dynamic range is like not as much as something else. Then you look at Ricci, who's shooting icy landscapes, and there's detail in all that snow, there's detail in all those shadows, and it's there. It's absolutely there. So I don't know what to say about those tests. I know there's some people out there that don't put any faith in like the lab testing, and in theory, like you should. But I'm starting to lose faith in them as well, because I'll tell you, I've shot pretty much like every Nikon out there, and I'm not feeling like this is falling short on dynamic range at all. It still gives me that great color. The lenses are incredible, and I think one thing that needs to be said about the Z series that hasn't been said or emphasized enough is the lenses are being built from zero, right? So they're actually keeping things in mind like video. They're worrying about things like, you know, focus breathing, which was a huge problem for me trying to film on other cameras with F-mount lenses. The focus breathing was crazy while I'm talking, and you could hear the lens, and it was a whole thing. But this isn't that. And Canon is in that same boat. They were able to start from scratch and build their lenses. Now I know there's no third-party lenses. Here's the thing about that. Yeah, we would all like more affordable options, but there's been plenty of times in history of this industry where third-party lenses have come out, but they didn't work with something new in the bodies. And the camera manufacturers know what they're gonna implement, and they keep that native, you know, talking to the camera correctly. Case in point, Sony. They have internal focus breathing, right? That this like simulation where if it's trying to compensate for the focus breathing, it'll do it in the camera by cropping just a little bit, and then it's almost like a form of stabilization. Well, third-party lenses won't let you do that, right? But if you bought the Sony lenses, it would. So I feel like Nikon's looking at affordable options in their own brand, like the lens, the 28 to 75 or whatever it is, 2.8, which people thought was a Tamron with a Nikon tax, but they're finding it's better image quality, better sealing, and it's just the design of the lens under the Nikon brand at a lower price point than things they already offer. And I think they're gonna continue doing stuff like that before we start seeing third-party lenses out there. So as far as that being a downfall or the lens system being a downfall for me, it isn't. But if you're someone that needs like these mega long lenses and you're a hardcore sports guy, I totally get it, I totally hear you. But knowing guys like Rod Marr and Joe McNally and stuff personally, and I'm watching them just use the lenses they have with the adapter, no problem. If not, the lenses acting faster and more accurate and better. It's hard to argue that, you know, there just isn't an option or a way to get this thing off the ground. And the Z series is only 3 years deep, and we're just getting started with the R system and the Z system. It's super exciting. I mean, I think the R3 is an incredible camera. I'm getting on a tangent. Z9, love and hate. All right, we're getting back to this, I promise. Sorry guys, this one was a rambly one. I know this seems like a little bit of a lazy video, but I'm just trying to get this channel resuscitated. So I thought this was something I should jump on. I know a lot of people have been DMing me, asking me my actual thoughts on the camera. And so far, I am absolutely excited to pick this thing up every time. There's cameras out there that are a bunch of specs sealed in a box and they sound amazing, but then you go and use them and they're just not speaking your language. They're not doing the images you want. But for me, this camera is doing that. I'm getting the images I want. I'm getting the features I want. I'm getting the performance I want, durability I want, battery life I want. The things that are maybe speed bumps or stop gaps or stopping me, you know, like the flash thing, when I find the workaround, I'm like, oh, the workaround's almost a little better. Or the fact that, you know, it doesn't have this or whatever, I'm going, yeah, but I didn't pay an extra grand for that. And then people talking about the buffer. Well, the buffer is getting alleviated more and more and more by the faster and faster cards, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And I gotta give Nikon credit to the fact that they didn't make us pay for a big ass buffer with the price of the camera. You're basically buying your buffer how you want with the cards you're investing in. If you're someone that's shooting slow and, you know, little macro work or studio work, or you're tethering, doesn't matter anyway. I got news for you. So I'll save the grand and I'll buy another lens. Oh wait, I did, the 24 to 120 f4. I bought that. So, I mean, I don't know. I just think they did a great job. I think it's been a long time coming. I'm excited to see where the Z series goes from here. I think that they're thinking in a whole nother way, collaborating with a lot of different brands, listening to feedback out there. And if you haven't noticed, Nikon's been giving a lot of things for the dollar, right? The Z6 is a great camera. Z6 II is a great camera for the price point. They were the first ones to do 10-bit video on that price point, you know, but no one said anything about that because they're Nikon. They get a beating when other brands get celebrated or let off the hook so easily. It sucks, right? But if you're a Nikon user and you're looking for the next level of the Nikon series, this Z9, I got it as a working professional. I am extremely happy with everything that's in my hand here, and the small things I'm complaining about either have a workaround or I think they're just gonna get fixed overall, or maybe I'm just being spoiled and want stupid things like 60 frames per second at 22 megapixel JPEGs, which I'll never use, but I want it because I want it. All right, this one was a little long. I'm sorry, I just kind of go off the cuff and there's no script to any of these things. But if you're new to this channel, please consider hitting subscribe. I would love to build more of a community here. Don't forget to hit like, share the video around, drop me a comment, join my Discord if you guys would like to talk more about some cameras and meet some other tech geeks and photo nerds. They're sitting there in the Discord waiting for you guys to come hang out, share some work, talk a little bit. I go live on Twitch, live here on YouTube, on Instagram, and all sorts of other things. So follow me at LastXWitness on all the stuff. At me on Twitter. Yeah, that was a lot. I mean, it was a lot of camera, right? Yeah, I think I'm good. All right, bye.